Good evening. Hi, how's everyone going tonight? We're all excited, aren't we? My name is Curran. I would like to start tonight by acknowledging the Yagara and Turrbal people as the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet this evening, paying my respects to their ancestors and elders past, present and emerging, and their ongoing sovereignty and custodianship. I would also like to extend the acknowledgement and respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here tonight and your continuing connection to land, water and communities. I'd just like to say thank you to Ben for his performance. Ben is generally known for his work with the band Regurgitator for over 30 years now, as well as a myriad of other projects, Pangea, Broken Head, The Stalkers, Jump to Light Speed, Radio 5. Ben has spent the past years working and writing and recording material for a variety of contemporary dance and theatre shows, plus the theatrical children's Po Go-Go show. Ben has also channeled his energy into solo performances and 3 albums, Goodbye Machine, Strange Tales of Drugs and Lost Love, and the more recent Golden Path. Ben also enjoys some psych rock radness with his latest 3-piece band, Mungo Fungo Band. And he's going to be returning at the end of our panel for a final performance. So thank you again, Ben. Okay, so just some quick housekeeping for everybody. This is our, we feel like we're in a plane about to take off. We have our emergency exits. We have our doors at the front, everybody. Front and rear. If you do need to leave, we do ask you if you could please go up the stairs and leave by the rear of the building, not come down and go across the panel, if that's at all possible. Obviously, if the stairs are a challenge, please feel free to go out the front. Can everybody please now put your phones onto silent? But you can have them on hand for Slido. So with Slido, if you've got any burning questions that you feel you need to ask one of the panel tonight, you can join Slido. It's up on there. And you enter the code STREETPRESS. It's just one word. Or scan the QR code that's coming up on the screen. Enter your first name so that we know who you are, and we will try to fit in questions. Obviously, there's a lot of us here tonight, and we're going to do it's a bit like speed dating. We're going to go and try and get through as many questions as we can. So if you put one in and it doesn't come up, don't be discouraged. But we'd love your input all the same. Okay, so a little bit about tonight's event. It's the launch of the Streets of Your Town Mapping Brisbane Street Press. Woohoo! It's being held in partnership with the University of Queensland and AusLit. AusLit is a national database of Australian-related literature, storytelling and criticism, and it's managed and housed by the University of Queensland. The Brisbane Street Press project started in mid-2024 and it's going to run until at least mid-2026. The project emerged from an interest in the impact of social media and how it has been with young people navigating urban spaces, compared with the experiences in the 80s and 90s when young people, namely us, were heavily dependent on free magazines found stacked in the doorways of their favourite cafes, clubs and shops. The street press is largely dead, and yet the form played such a central role in our lives, in Brisbane's cultural history. It also helped to incubate local bands and writers. This project involves a collection of interviews with industry figures. There will be many, many more interviews still happening throughout the year. There's archival analysis of the actual publications themselves, and there's a development of an interactive digital map that's actually up and running and live. We're very excited. It should be coming up on your screen as well. It's auslit.shinyapps.io/streetpress, or there'll be a QR code which is there, and we'd love for you to leave your own story, your own sharing of your time, of your experience, and It's going to be a beautiful historical tree that's just going to keep growing and growing and growing with everybody inputting. So please go and add to that. Okay, all right. I would now like to introduce you to our beautiful, talented panel. We have Kellie Lloyd on the end, Sean Sennett, Mundanara Bayles, and James Lees. I'm just going to give you a really quick little rundown on everybody. You probably all know who these people are, but just in case you don't. Okay, Sean. Sean owned and edited Queensland's popular street press magazine, Time Off, for 2 decades, publishing over 1,000 issues. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes. Sean has interviewed over 2,000 artists, from unsigned local acts through to the likes of Paul McCartney, Bruce Springsteen, and David Bowie. He now hosts the podcast Time to Talk, and it's in its 7th season. So, welcome, Sean.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mundanara Bayles is the managing director and co-founder of Blackcard, a 100% Aboriginal-owned business that provides cultural capability training and consultancy services. Blackcard's purpose is working with people, not for people, with the genius of Aboriginal knowledge. Mundanara is also a board member of Deadly Futures Indigenous Corporation, which is a not-for-profit organisation that supports Indigenous youth and communities. Mundanara was the first Aboriginal podcaster on the iHeartRadio network, hosting the award-winning Black Magic Woman podcast. And she's a TEDx presenter and visiting fellow at QUT with teaching and learning. Please welcome Mundanara. James Lees is an arts and event producer and musician who's devoted much of his energy to creating and presenting live musical performance, ideas, conversation, events, and festival programs. He got his creative start in Brisbane in the early 1990s, becoming involved with the blossoming music scene as a musician, a gig promoter, a writer for street magazine, Rave magazine, and as well he joined the team at the Zoo. Around this time, he also opened his own business, Poster Bill, distributing arts and music posters and flyers all over the city, as well as managing the distribution of several of Brisbane's leading free street publications. Please welcome James. And last but by no means least, our lovely, lovely Kellie Lloyd, who is a founding member of Brisbane band Screamfeeder. She got her introduction to the industry side of things as volunteering as a sub-editor for Bums, Brisbane Underground Music Scene magazine.
I had to explain that a few times.
Yes. Straight from uni. She's a contributing writer for Time Off.
And Rave.
And probably...
More than... Yeah, I got that wrong. I did most of my writing for Rave rather than Time Off.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you for...
That's okay.
Thanks for fixing up your own bio, Kellie.
It's fine.
Thank
I just
you.
went send and went, oh, hang on. I've got to look at some diaries.
She has also written reviews and was the Brisbane correspondent for the Hot Metal magazine for a short time. So this is our wonderful, amazing panel. All right, so time for some questions. I'm going to start off with Sean, if you're okay with this.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, Sean, for over 20 years, as we said, you managed the street paper Time Off magazine.
Yeah.
In that time, you commissioned, designed and published, as we said, 1,000 issues. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us, as you were working on that very first issue, what sort of future did you imagine for the magazine and for yourself?
Oh, that's really interesting. Well, Time Off started before I got involved. So SEMPA was happening out at the University of Queensland. Time Off was kind of adjacent to that. And initially, Time Off was a magazine that people paid for. I think it came out monthly. Eventually, it became a street paper as we know it. But in the early days, it was restaurant guides, travel, not so much music. And when I got involved, I couldn't believe I was getting to write for Time Off. I'd seen it at university, And I remember the first story I ever wrote for anybody was for the Melbourne Age, and they paid me $100. And I thought, wow, if I could do 3 of these a week, I would never have to get a real job. So I see a little ad in Time Off saying, we're looking for contributors. So I thought, great. I was working in between uni breaks down at Dreamworld on the bumper cars. The cockroaches were coming to play, and I thought I could review the cockroaches, make $100. This will be fantastic. So I write the review for Time Off. They publish it. I'm over the moon. I go in to pick up the check, and the guy comes outside and he folds the check up and he puts it in my hand. He goes back inside, and I open it. It's $15, right? And I'm thinking, I've got to write a lot of stuff. So for a year, I would just avoid my dad at all costs and just try and freelance write for anybody I could. Finally got a job at Time Off, and it was 1989. The fellow that owned it had just lost all his money in the stock market crash of '89. So I worked there, and the receivers said, you are the lowest paid person we've ever had at a magazine. We'll give you a pay rise, which is the first pay rise in the history of receivership. And I really believed in the magazine, and we had a really great core of people. And really, over those issues, those 1,000 issues, we just took it week to week, and we kind of reflected the culture around us as it was happening. And we tried to sort of, it was obviously became far more music orientated, and we did theatre and we did films. Got rid of the restaurant guide. The gig guide was the big thing. And really, as the culture grew in Brisbane, there's a real emphasis by underground bands, record labels, everybody, to make this a city that rivals Sydney and Melbourne for producing art, producing music. And we just reflected that and rode that tide, and the magazine just grew and grew and grew with that scene growing. We grew in tandem with each other.
Amazing, amazing. I'm sure I'm not alone in wanting to thank you for all of your dedication in this field, and we really appreciate your work.
Thank you.
Sean. Okay, so leading on from that, for the rest of the panel, I want you to think about, and do you remember your first encounter with street paper? Where you were, where did you find it? What were your first impressions when you saw this strange thing? Kellie, can you lead us out?
Yeah, so I grew up in Toowoomba, and I would come to Brisbane and, you know, partake in all the exciting things in the city, like Rocking Horse Records and Kent Records. And that would have been the very first time going into Rocking Horse and, you know, seeing all of the little posters, and I would have collected everything that was there and taken it all back home with me, where I put it all over my wardrobe and my walls, and I would have read every magazine that I had, like back to front, upside down. But then somehow across the road from my high school, there was a news agency that stocked the NME and the Melody Maker. They were like 6 months behind, but they would arrive and I'd buy them, and they were the coolest things I'd ever seen as well. I was like, oh my God, you know, in Brisbane, there's our own version of that happening. And I just remember being blown away, and that's what I wanted to be part of.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, James, what about you?
Kellie, you stole my thunder a bit there, because
sorry.
I think we've had really parallel experiences with that, because arriving in Brisbane 1990, coming from the Sunshine Coast, and Warwick before that. So we're right on the end of the Joe years, you know, so it just felt like such a cultural desert, you know, especially Caloundra in the 80s. Sorry if I offended anybody. One of my school friends is here. She knows exactly what I'm talking about, Gillian. Coming to Brisbane, and Rocking Horse was such a centre, the record stores, and Kent as well. And just, you've got to remember, I think it goes without saying that we didn't have any internet back then. We didn't have the phones. Everything was not at your fingertips. Like, we were walking around this really, you know, largely very big country town, and it was largely pretty boring. So when you did spy something that had some vibrancy to it, that had stuff in it that you might be interested in, e.g. the street press, and it was free, you would pick it up, and it was just this hub, this focal point. You would pick that up, and everything you wanted to know was in there, which bands to see, where to go and see theatre, clubs where things were happening. Yeah, but to answer your question specifically, I can't remember. But I'm going to say Rocking Horse, early 1990.
It's a good bet.
Yeah.
That's a good bit. What about you, Mundanara? Can you remember?
So I'm a little bit younger.
Yes.
I was born
How dare
in
you.
83.
Okay. So
And I came up from Sydney. I live on the Sunshine Coast though now. But I came up from Sydney, from Redfern in particular, in 1990. And we came to Brisbane so that my dad could help with Murray Country, which is radio AAA Murray Country, 98.9 FM. But right at that time, I remember I was probably 8, 9 years old. My uncle Ross Watson was trying to get this newspaper going. So we didn't really have any access to, I was a kid, I didn't see these magazines. But as I was getting a little bit older, 11, 12, I remember going into Rocking Horse.
yeah.
That was the place to be
Yeah.
as a 12-year-old, going to high school and hanging out there with my friends. I don't know if I was interested in anything in the store, but to be in there, you're kind of cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I remember seeing everything. I didn't touch anything. I had no money to buy anything. But Rocking Horse was like a cool place. And I can't believe I haven't thought of that place in nearly 30 years until right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I know that we used to go and buy a lot of tickets to shows from Rocking Horse. It was a great, you'd go in and have a look at all the records. Never left empty-handed, I don't think.
Because you could grab some street press.
Yes.
If you didn't have any money.
That's right. That's
Well,
right.
I think people in Brisbane loved music and eating because Rocking Horse and Pancake Manor used to go through 1,000 copies a week of time off.
Oh, amazing. 1,000 copies.
I can
1,000
attest to
copies on
that
their
too.
own.
Yeah.
But Pancake Manor was 24/7.
Yeah, that's true.
Yes, the night owls. Okay. All right. Now I've got a Slido. We're gonna inject that. Okay. Now this might. What was your favourite street magazine? This is anonymous. Just quickly fire it off, Billo.
Oh my God, picking favourites. I was such an aficionado of the street press. That's a really hard question.
It's like your favourite child.
I know Sean's sitting right there, right?
I know. Okay.
Look, I would have to say, like, it was a real dual time off and rave thing for me. I can't pick between them.
Okay, sure. Mundanara?
Well, the first magazine I ever saw was my Uncle Shane Phillips on it, and he was Condom Man.
Oh my God! I have those stickers still on my skateboard.
Is that Streetwise or some comic thing? I don't know.
Wow, what a great answer.
Compton Man, great.
It's like, I know him.
Sean, now can you give an unbiased?
Hey, if I could still fit in my time off shirt, I'd wear it tonight. So going for time off.
Great, fantastic.
I'm
Kellie.
going to say time off also.
Oh, wow.
But I'm going to say, though, I felt like, because, I wrote for Rave and Time Off, there was a rivalry between the two, and it was kind of like Fords and Holdens, which one do you like better, which one's cooler, and I think that it was up and down at different times. So I think that Time Off was probably the more enduring.
Oh, thanks, Kelly.
That's all right.
Well, this actually leads into Kellie, so I've got a question for you. During your time as a sub-editor at Bums, which was another
Brisbane
magazine.
Underground Music Scene.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Brisbane Underground Music Scene, just in
Early
case anybody
90s.
didn't get that.
Yeah.
So in our city, there was a lot of political resistance, cohesion and sometimes anarchy. One of the questions here is, how do you think the Joe government played in creating opposition culture that forced an underground culture in music, art and magazines? How do you think that played out across the pages that you helped to create?
Well, I think, there was just an undercurrent. It was undeniable. And it wasn't even something you had to necessarily write about. But one of the things that I know with Bums, it was a very, I'll say, seat of your pants arrangement, where it was like, it was all slapdash. We had an office and we would write everything on the computer there, but we would get it all printed and delivered to someone's house, and it was compiled with people sitting around in a lounge room doing the, I forget what it was. What do we call it when you were compiling it? No, it was called something else. Anyway, well, whatever it is, doesn't matter.
I composited at rave, like we put a paper together.
No, this is the physical folding. Like you'd have like 15
I got you,
batches. Collating.
Collating.
Thank you.
Collating.
Thank you.
Okay.
The collating process happened with a few beers at someone's house. And so that would be Friday morning, lunchtime, and we'd be folding. Then we would take them out to Rock Against Work, which was happening at like Metropolis or the Orient, and it would be an afternoon gig, and that's where we would deliver that week's thing, as well as everywhere else. And the Rock Against movement was quite... it was a weekly thing. So we were always rocking against something. We were rocking against poverty, rocking against Joe, rocking against racism, rocking against... There's a poster that might show up a bit later about anti-bashing.
Yes.
There was all kinds of things that we were active against, and just happened to take place in nightclubs with bands playing.
Okay, cool.
And I loved your magazine too, because it was all about supporting local artists, right? You didn't go beyond that.
No, I was a sub-editor. There was a few people who were involved, a dean, someone called Mark at that time, and it was all about local stuff. And there was hardly any advertising, but there was advertising, and there was just enough to get us over the line each week. And everybody was doing everything for free, and the advertising would pay for the printing, and so it was very, very local.
Okay, I've got another Slido question I'm just going to jump in here with. And it says, wondering how many people in the audience this evening were writers of any magazines. I'm sure there's lots. So can we have some hands in the air? Because I'm sure that there's a big representation. And
there's
thank
quite
you.
a few of you.
Yes, hello.
Wow.
Hello. Yes, please.
That's so cool.
Thank you.
Nice.
All right.
Can I say one little thing?
Yes.
When I saw that question come up about Joe Bjorky-Peterson days,
Yes.
obviously I was a kid in the kind of peak of his time. When we came to Brisbane and my dad started working at the radio station, I remember Uncle Neville Bonner. Uncle Neville Bonner was at a board meeting, and at the radio station I was only a kid, and it's the first time I met him. I was probably 10 or 11, and obviously probably the last time I met him. And he delivered this speech. I was a kid, and I had no idea that he was the first Aboriginal senator. And he delivered this speech, and he was talking about how, 4ZZZ, we got to remember where our roots came from for Murray Radio, 4AAA. We've got to always remember 4ZZZ. Their mob gave us that 1 hour a week at UQ on Murray Radio. It was called Murray Time or Murray Hour. And Uncle Ross, that 1 hour a week, you had Kev Carmody coming into your little radio station. And if we didn't exist because 4ZZZ, if they didn't let us, have that 1 hour, then Kev Carmody probably would not have become who he was. So here's Uncle Neville Bonner talking about Kev Carmody. I'm 10, didn't really know who Kev Carmody was. But these are conversations now that I remember as a kid that have contributed to this country in terms of music and art at a time that we were, pretty oppressed as Aboriginal people here in Brisbane in particular, Queensland. You had Uncle Kev Carmody writing all this music, but not one commercial or there was no Indigenous media then, no one would play his music. So Murray Hour was the first time Kev Carmody got to play his music thanks to 4ZZZ and UQ. So I had to share that story because that's probably one thing I remember with Bjorky-Peterson. Nobody wanted to mix or do anything or support Aboriginal people. And
Thank you.
it's 30 years, they're still going strong, which is deadly to see.
Yeah, fantastic. Awesome. I had a question and you just answered it, so I don't even need to ask that question. So thank you. So James, from Street Press, readers could get gig news, info about movies, album reviews, interviews with their favourite magazines, all for free as they moved about the city. How important do you think Street Press was for the local music industry?
Well, from my perspective of being a Street Press reader, but being a musician myself, it goes without saying 100% all important. So it was like the Bible sort of appeared every week, and occasionally, if your band was in it or your friend's band was in it, like that story that Ben told us before, about his friends that were suddenly transported from downstairs at Mum's place in the Redlands to suddenly being in the magazine. Like what a huge step that was. So being in a bit of a similar position when you did find yourself or your own band in the Street Press like that was incredibly special. It was a real step up. But yeah, I guess to answer your question, again, we didn't have the phones and we didn't have Facebook and all the stuff that we've got now. So everybody's attention was just funneled into, here is what's happening this weekend, here's what we're reading about this week. And we all knew when the Street Press came out. So Kellie, you were saying Bums came out on Friday afternoon, and Time Off came out on Wednesday morning. So you just sort of went, you just sort of included that in your schedule for that week, and you went to Rocking Horse or the Pancake Manor, where there were stacks that high, and everybody took them. So, so important.
Yes,
kind of like, and if you're a musician or trying to get your music out there, it's along with 4ZZZ, which was a great thing for you to mention, Mundanara, and the Street Press. I mean, these were your only two ways to really get things out there, on top of actually playing and doing the actual gigs.
So leading on from that, another Slido question. What was your favourite gig that you went to in Brisbane in the 90s? Panel, have a think. Is it Mundanara? Maybe a little bit.
I was very lucky to grow up in Aboriginal media, and every Aboriginal artist that came to Brisbane, we got to go to their concerts because they came to the radio station and Dad then interviewed them. So I remember going to the zoo.
Good answer.
Went to the zoo. I don't remember the places, what they were called, but if Yothi India was playing, Uncle Archie Roach, Annie Ruby, Paul Kelly, Kev Carmody, Coloured Stone, Warumpi Band, we were there.
Yeah.
And then they'd come back to our house and jam all night.
Wow.
So cool.
So we were really lucky.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing.
Absolutely. Kellie?
Look, there's a million gigs I went to in the 90s, but I think the first one that came to my mind, which I think is probably a really one of those gigs that everyone's like, yeah, I was at that, was Jane's Addiction at Fortitude. Oh, no, hang on, the Festival Hall, thank you. Fortitude Hall, it's the new one.
Yeah.
And I stood outside. Well, I went to that gig, but I stood outside while Nirvana played at Festival Hall because I didn't have enough money. I was just a student, just a lonely little student. Yeah, and I stood outside listening to Nirvana. Yeah.
I just thought of Festival Hall.
Yeah.
Spearhead. Michael Franti. My first concert at Festival Hall, and that was a big thing.
Yeah.
To go to Festival Hall.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah.
Then Snoop Dogg was in Festival Hall as well. That was cool.
We were talking before the panel, and my first gig, as I think I was a 10-year-old, I went to Susie Quattro at Festival Hall.
Pretty
so cool. And my mother dressed myself and my sister in matching pink dresses with large sleeves, and I fell asleep after the first song. My older sister hated me and pretended she didn't know me, even though she was matched outfits. And then afterwards, my mum said, "Oh wow, it's really easy to find you in the crowd afterwards because we're in pink outfits." So Susie Quattro, that's yeah. Sean, what about you?
Gee whiz, that's really hard. I mean, I
is
saw so
a hard
many
one.
gigs in the 90s. You mentioned that night with Nirvana and Violent Femmes played too. That was incredible. One of the best gigs I ever saw in that period, it wasn't kind of a street press kind of venue at all. Remember Transformers that was in the middle of the city?
Yes.
I remember going there one night and seeing the Stray Cats, you know, the rockabilly
Oh,
band
wow.
from
Oh,
America.
yeah.
And metaphorically, they burned the place to the
Yeah,
ground.
right.
They were incredible.
That
So
would
I'd
be
probably have
great.
them at the top, I think.
Yeah, cool. Billy?
Oh, so many to pick from. The thing that the show that sprang to mind immediately that really struck me is when Grant McLennan and Robert Forster came together to do a duo gig at the Zoo in 1998. That felt incredibly special because I had been a Go-Betweens fan since the age of 13, and I'd been working at the Zoo for 2 or 3 years by that point, and it was suddenly all of these worlds were sort of coming together. So this venue that we worked at, suddenly we had these two people who were just total heroes of mine. We were suddenly just in one world together, and that felt really, really special. I designed the poster for that one too.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, claim to fame.
That was a magic
So, yeah, that was a big deal for me, that one.
So if people want to jump on the QR code and put their amazing, your favourite experience that you had in the 90s, we'd love to hear everybody in the room. Don't have to do it now, I can do it later. But yeah, it would be great if we all just added our collaborations and our moments that gave us a lot of joy. Okay, so back to Kellie. Kellie, you did a lot of touring throughout Australia.
Yes.
How do you think Brisbane fared compared to other cities in regards to our media? What do you think sets us apart?
I think we had a lot of media. I think we had a few things to choose from. Scene magazine, Time Off, Rave, Bums when it was there. And there's like Semper, you said. I forgot about Semper.
Even Brisbane News was a really
Yeah,
good
Brisbane
magazine when it
News,
started out.
Q News. There was
Yeah, all the queer
there
media
was
as well.
lots of different
stuff.
things that were covering the arts. So going to Sydney, they had Drum Media. There was Impress in Melbourne, DB in Adelaide, and everyone had their own thing, and they were all very, locally centric. So I think Drum Media was one of those ones that had. It was a stepping stone to other magazines or like bigger, publications, and a lot of those writers. There's probably a lot more, a lot of competition to be a writer. And in Brisbane, I felt, because I was writing for both of the main magazines, that they would take anybody. But they obviously had some kind of form of, you had to be a writer. And I'd just come out of uni, and I was a big music fan, and I played music. So I feel like Brisbane's street press had a lot of voices in it that were making music. There were a lot of musicians who were writing, and it was also probably quite unusual to have someone in a band reviewing another band's stuff, which I was just having a flick through some of the things that I wrote, and I did a little article about Powderfinger. And
were you kind, Kellie?
I was as kind as I could have been. Because I actually...
What a great answer.
I'm really sorry. I prided myself, and I still do, on being authentic in my voice, and I'm not going to, I'll just do it how I feel it, and I wasn't a fan. And I did a review, and I was like, I talked about it, I did an interview with them, and I said, look, I don't think it's going to be on high rotation in my house. But, that was fair, and I was actually quite proud to be able to put an opinion out there that wasn't going to be like, oh, all hail everything. And I did actually do quite a few reviews where I was like, this is okay, and being a little critical. And, I think a lot of small magazines kind of probably didn't really encourage maybe that honesty in some ways. You had the freedom to do that in street press. or something.
I think that you made a really good point there, Kellie, is that, I mean, we just saw the hands that went up before of people who said, I was writing for Street Press. So many of us who were writing for Street Press were artists and musicians and bands as well, and you did come across that sort of little bit of a conflict of interest where you're going to go, oh, I've got to review my friend's band, you know, and what if they were really good, and everyone would go, oh, he's just friends with them, and then if you were critical of them, you go, what a bastard, he's friends with them, you know. So when I wrote for Rave Magazine for 3 years, and when I was writing, when I was doing music writing, I used a pseudonym that I kept closely guarded.
Can you share with us?
Oh, I guess so. So my pseudonym when I was writing, because I wrote about theatre and film as well, I used my own name, but when I was writing about music, especially local music, I was Anita Nielsen.
Okay, there we go.
I got hate mail. I was hard.
I wonder if I got hate mail.
Okay, well...
We kind of had a weird thing with time off because we'd have all the CDs to get reviewed in an office and people would come in and take whatever they wanted. So obviously people would take things they were going to like because my favourite band's got an album, I'll take it and review it. I remember once looking at the magazine, it was like we had a page and a half of 4-star reviews. And it's like, there can't be that many great albums coming out every week, but that's the way it rolled.
Yeah.
I was just going to add, I lived in Yeronga in the 1994 to 97, and I don't know if it's true, so I'm going to put it out there, but supposedly the band Powderfinger, maybe the drummer lived in Yeronga. So there was a big thing in Yeronga.
Well, I lived in Yeronga too.
Did you?
Yeah.
There's one house that was playing really heavy music, and everyone used to say, yeah, that's Powderfinger. They're rehearsing in that house. And I wasn't really into Powderfinger until later I realised who they were. And I was like, hey,
Can we text Ian?
famous
and, like,
We
people.
could ask... We'll get back to you on that. We might have to put it
It
up.
was Wilton Terrace in my street.
Oh,
They
Okay.
used to keep us up a lot on school nights.
right.
See, I
Five
told
doors
you
down.
about them.
Wow, so someone can fact check. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll look that up. We'll get back to you. Okay. So, in keeping with this conversation, with the street press, there was lots of cultural events that happened in media and in street press that influenced us at the time. I was wondering if each of you could share something that appeared in street press or on the radio that just blew your mind, it rocked your world. And, you know, we didn't have mobile phones then, so you got on the landline, you were talking to each other, but like something that was just mind-blowing of that time. Anyone wanting to go? Kellie, I'm putting you first.
Oh, wow. No, nothing comes to mind except for opening up, seeing who's touring and going, oh my God, they're coming, whoever it was, you know. And just finding out about, you know, a new album coming out. I don't think there was any huge events that happened that I found out through through street press, because it wasn't that immediate, and we had the news and we would talk to each other and that kind of stuff. But yeah, I'm going to say that. And working out what band you were going to go see on the Friday night, you know, like going to a pub and meeting your friends and going, what's on? And then choosing what to go to and then planning your night and going to multiple things, running around the valley.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I remember when I was a reader picking up, it would have been time off and seeing the concert calendar, and there's upcoming section, things were coming. And I was a massive fan of Stephen Cummings, the Melbourne singer-songwriter, and the fact that he might be coming to Queensland just blew my mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm thinking mine's obviously got to do with radio because my dad and my family have been in media for a long time. But my granny Mook, have you heard of Maureen Watson?
Yes.
Okay, she was the Google Doodle on November 9 last year, which would have been her 93rd birthday, by the way.
Oh.
Beautiful woman, and in that Google Doodle, obviously Google is acknowledging what she achieved in her life. But Gran had angina, and she was protesting at the 88 Commonwealth Games protest out at QE2 Stadium, and she was arrested, and the police wouldn't give her heart medicine. And there's a lot of footage of this as well. Anyhow, she gets locked up. Then Auntie Lilla Watson gets locked up, and Auntie Lilla was employed at UQ as a lecturer, and Uncle Ross gets locked up. So they're all brothers and sisters, and they're all getting locked up, and they all see each other in the watch house. And 4ZZZ, via the radio, basically said, hey, we need to raise some money to get these people out of the watch house because the police have put the bail 3 times the amount of a white person so that these black people, which from my family, won't go back to the protest. So I really wanted to share with people tonight, if it wasn't for the white community here in Brisbane, you know, our families, our people, in particular my family, would have had a different experience during some of those moments in time, which are big moments in time. Mm-hmm. But it was 4ZZZ that raised the money through the white community in Brisbane and bailed out hundreds of people in Brisbane, hundreds, not just Aboriginal people, but the white people that were locked up, their bail was less, and any Aboriginal person to bail out was 3 times higher.
That's great.
But my family talk about that to just remind people that there's a lot of positive things that have happened in this community here in Brisbane between black and white that you won't find written anywhere. And to remember those positive stories and to keep sharing those, because I think that's what my gran would want me to do here tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And there is such a connection with 4ZZZ, all their amazing work that they did, like the oral history as the written history. So it goes hand in hand. It's a really lovely connection. And it was always echoed in the street press, and they always sort of channeled and looked after each other. And, you know, you can't stress enough how amazing 4ZZZ has been throughout our adulthood and all that we have for Brisbane.
Turning 50 this year.
50, yes.
Yeah.
So if there's any non-subscribers in the audience, I'm just doing a bit of a plug here, please go and...
We're not affiliated.
No. I just think, you know, we probably spend our money on a lot of frivolous things. I think that's an amazing thing for everything that they've done, just even that story. Thank you for sharing that.
I was just thinking in my head then, in terms of, you know, 1988, like Aboriginal people... like became citizens in the 70s. So a lot of our people and families didn't have jobs. So no one had money. So I don't think there's many stories in my family where people were able to go to concerts or buy magazines or go and socialise, because it was a very dangerous time to be out after dark if you're Aboriginal. Yeah. So I was trying to think of like the good times. I always think of the positive things. And Michael Frante Spearhead was that moment where I was like, we're at a concert. And all our friends at the Murray School, to tell them that we went to a concert, you know, most of those kids today have still never been to a concert. It's a privilege to be able to, you know, be in media and to be able to participate, and we got free tickets. Very lucky.
Very lucky.
Can I just shout out Quentin up there, who's worked for ZZZ for 30 years?
Quentin, thank you.
What a commitment.
Awesome.
Come back in 5 years, we'll do it again.
We're not ageing you, Quentin.
He can't be more than 32, surely.
Okay, so we're talking about 4ZZZ. What's everybody's favourite show on 4ZZZ? Like...
You better say Friday Neon, because...
Absolutely, Friday Neon.
Anyone from the audience want a shout out?
Cool.
Awesome.
Yeah.
What about? Hey. There's so many good shows.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Thank you, 4ZZZ. Thanks, Quentin.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, we might get another Slido. Speaking of different magazines, does anybody have any memories of the scene? So there's very few magazines that still actually exist, unfortunately, but the scene does in paper format. I think it's monthly. I think you can get it at... Congratulations.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And you can get it at JB Hi-Fi. So, but now it's actually called Scenester. So it's evolved.
And it's become national, and obviously there's an online, vibrant online version as well.
I think I remember when Scene actually started, it was more of a dance music sort of vibe. And
That's true.
it was filling a gap where there wasn't really being reviews and artists and stuff being interviewed. So it definitely slotted right in there and was really important in Brisbane.
And they had a cafe too, remember? Scene
Yeah.
Cafe in
Oh
the
yeah,
Fortitude
up
Valley.
on the corner.
It was on the corner of Brunswick and Ann Street that had previously been, in the 80s, a butcher, which was called Valley Meats. And I was thinking, well, that's such a great name for a club.
Valley Meats.
Oh, Billy.
Should have
But
kept it.
if anybody came to the zoo, at the beginning of the zoo, we bought all our meat from Valley Meats.
There you go. I didn't imagine it.
So if you got the nachos, which we were legendary for, you would have been eating Valley Meats nachos.
Wow.
What about your chocolate cake?
How did we get on? We just totally
sorry,
hijacked
sorry.
your
Going off on tangents here. We're going off on tangents. Okay, so it sort of lends itself a little bit that we don't have as many street press anymore. So do you think there's anything missing on the panel? Has anything taken its place? Are there holes? Like what is on the bongo drums now? Like how do the kids know what's going on? Like
That's the question. You know, being someone who makes music and plays in bands and you tour, you used to just, you know, put an ad in street press in all the different cities you're going to, and you know that it's getting in front of people. Now it's like, how do you talk to your audience if you don't have an email list and a website that, you know, no one goes and visits a website unless they're driven to, unless they know to look for something. It's incredibly hard to now get your name in front of people because they're not just sitting on the train or waiting for their lunch to arrive and flicking through and seeing the gig guide. Like, it's incredibly hard, and it's changed everything. Street press was such a huge part of your life, you know, just going and picking up a thing. It would be what you looked at when you were waiting around. You would read everything in it, you know, even if you weren't interested in it. If you were waiting at the doctor's or on a bus trip or at your mum's or like whatever, you were looking through those magazines. Now, I don't know, it's social media and you have to be connected somehow.
Yeah, it was quite a linear experience where you'd start left and you'd work your way through the magazine. And James and I were talking before we started tonight. You'd often read about things you weren't interested in because they were in the magazine. So now there's such a mosaic of information. You pick out things you like. And I find that when I'm on my tablets or whatever it might be, that Apple know that I like reading about cricket from the 80s and they send me stories about that. And, you know, whereas back then with a magazine, we could have had somebody very popular on the cover, but very, what people then called alternative bands all the way through the magazine, and you'd read about them as well as you were going on that train ride.
Yeah.
Mundanara, how do you think the kids...
To be honest, I've got 5 kids, and my 14-year-old was telling me, "Don't do TikTok, Mum. I don't want my friends seeing you on TikTok." With my podcast, like, how do you get your, you know, your whatever you're doing, media, podcasting, playing a band, songs, albums, how do you get it out there to an audience and then know, hopefully, that you do have an audience to then go and either do a tour? And I've been told, like, obviously, you've got to get good at social media, you know, Facebook and Instagram and whatever. I'm on LinkedIn. So my kids won't ever have to worry about me. But I did start my TikTok account about 2 months ago, and I didn't tell my kids that I've got a TikTok account.
Uh-oh.
And it's interesting, right? One video or short for 15 seconds talking about the trade between Aboriginal people and the Macassans from Indonesia, right? This one 15-second video got me 1,000 followers in 24 hours.
Wow.
So I got my first 1,000 followers overnight from one video.
Well done.
I know. So I've got to,
Are you doing workshops on how to do this? Because I'll come.
There's some algorithms going on.
Yeah.
So I've got to get better at it myself, and I'm quite young, but my kids do not want me on TikTok. But that's where you're meant to be these days if you want to grow
Yeah.
your audience and
Apparently. Billy?
I think two things about that on top of those amazing points that you guys have said already. I think one thing, again, that Sean and I were chatting about beforehand is in the various street press publications that came out, each one of them had their own roster and store of writers, and so you got to know the character of those writers. So when you picked up Time Off, you would say, well, what's Andrew Stafford written about this week? You know, and you would know his style and you would know his tastes. So finding out what his big feature story that week would be something that you would come to knowing his work, and ditto for like all of the other writers as well. We mentioned Richard Kwong before, the writer who I don't know if any of you in the audience would know him, but Richard was quite funny, quite a shit stirrer, quite controversial. And Sean, did you tell me before that a band?
Oh yeah, there was a gig at Metropolis. Can't remember the band. It was some big American band, and halfway through the show, they stopped and said, "I'll leave out the expletives. Is Richard Kwong here?" And they held up his magazine, tore it to shreds on the stage, and poor old Richard's just sitting there watching the gig. But he was a great guy, and he had sort of his own language, and he wasn't edited. It was very free form. And he kept saying things like, tonight in Brisbane, tonight in Lost Brisbane. And he was getting closer and closer.
I didn't quite.
And then finally another guy, for the first time, wrote in Time Off, first time anywhere, it was in print, Bris Vegas. And Rich was like, damn, I was so close. I nearly had it.
Lily said it.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I think the other sort of thing, just to answer that question, Jock, is just a really basic thing, just thinking about what is the context that you're receiving this kind of information, you know? So when we're talking about picking up a magazine, picking up street press, all of us have talked about what those kind of scenarios might be. You kind of go, okay, Wednesday morning or Friday afternoon, I'm going to get my paper, or you're sitting on the bus, or you're waiting for your bus, or you're reading it over lunch, as opposed to all the doom scrolling that we do now, where Kellie, like you say, some band previously would have been running ads in the street press, but now you've chucked $20 behind a sponsored ad and someone's going, you know, like straight past it. And, you know, just thinking about how different it is to be on your phone and going like that, as opposed to sitting in a cafe with a coffee and going, wow, I'm reading Time Off, cool, what's this? You know, that's such a different scenario. That's such a different headspace to be in. And yeah, just thinking about which one of them might be a little bit more receptive and as to how you sort of don't filter that information as well.
And it was almost like seeing your people. It was almost like, you know, when people had their magazine under their arm and you're on the bus and, you know, it was like,
You'll see me because I have an orange
it was a
corsage.
fellow, yes. It was a kindred, a like-minded person.
Can I also add that one of the things about it was the physicalness of it? Like I remember being that 15 or 16-year-old kid coming to Brisbane, staying for the afternoon, getting all of those things and taking them back to Toowoomba, cutting them out and putting them on my book. You know, like I remember what those pieces of art were like, those ads. You know, they might have just been something that someone came up with really quickly, but they became something that was worth something to me. And all those handbills and stuff. If you're just buying an ad on YouTube or Facebook or whatever, no one's ever going to see it again. And it's this transientness, it's disappearing, it doesn't stay. And yes, we're not cutting down a million trees for it, but there's this art that's missing now.
Yeah. I can't believe I'm looking at the clock and we're almost out of time. It's gone so quickly. So all good things come to an end. And there are, as we said, there are some street press that are still operating, like Scene Star, but the large majority of them don't actually exist anymore. So this is for you, Sean. Can you share with us the memory of when you were making your final issue of Time Off? That must have been very poignant and emotional.
I guess it was, but for me it was a strange one because I was in a band myself. I remember going to rehearsal And I came out, we're having a break, and there's 5 guys in the band, and they were all standing around their car looking at their phone. And I thought, there's a shift in the culture now, things have moved on. But for me, what happened is I did time off for 20 years, and then a company from, I think they were from Melbourne or Sydney, wanted to buy time off. They sort of hounded me for a couple of years. And I think it was that moment when I saw those guys looking at their phones, I thought, yeah, this is probably the time to do something different. And then probably maybe 2 or 3 years later, I think poor old Rave went into bankruptcy, and time off had morphed into the music. And then I'm not sure when the last music came out, but that sort of era where there was 4 or 5 street papers, it disappeared. It was over.
Yeah.
So I was very sad, though, to see, that period of, that sort of golden period come to an end. There's a great line in Keith Richards' book, his memoir. He said the government should have kept 2 things to themselves: synthesizers and the internet. and I think the internet kind of killed the glory days of street press.
Oh. Well, on that note, that's where we're going to end. I would love for you to thank the panel. We've got Kellie, Lloyd, Sean Sennett, Mundanara, Bayles, James Lees.
Oh, thank you.
Can we thank you, Jock?
Hey? Oh,
Thank you, Jock.
Yeah.
What a great job.
Thank you to our amazing, talented Auslan interpreters, Rachel and Candice. To the State Library of Queensland and all the staff involved in helping put tonight together. The University of Queensland, Auslit, Brisbane Street Press, and a huge shout out to Nat and Caroline, along with all of your co-workers. Collaborators, advisors and participants, everyone's amazing care and dedication to this project. So this is a launch. We're just at the beginning, and it's so exciting to see, it's like a historical tree. We're not going to chop any trees down. It is going to be organic. It is going to be online. Everybody make sure that you download the QR code so that you can all be a part of it and put your voice to it. And I've got one final job, and that's welcoming Ben Eli back onto the stage, and he's going to serenade us out tonight. Yeah. But thank you.